Hello, everybody, and welcome to Telling Tales. Here we tell atmospheric stories together through the medium of tabletop role-playing games. On Monday nights, usually, we play Call of Cthulhu 7th edition. We're currently on a small break between arcs 2 and 3 of the anthology series that we're running. So we're doing a kind of Q&A this evening on things to do with the show so far, Call of Cthulhu in general, and role-playing games in general. So I am joined by 3 members of the cast of the games this evening. Steve, who played Edmund in the second arc, Fingask. Inga, who played Eliza in that same arc. And Matt, who is the only person here this evening who has been in both arcs and played Dane in the first arc and Samuel in the second. And we also have with us this evening, hiding in the shadows, John, our stream manager. Hi, John.
Hello.
This evening, John will be slightly changing his usual things and just putting questions on the screen, really, that have been some predetermined and some that might come up in the chat live. So that's exciting. Thanks, John, for all you do for us and for the world.
Oh, thanks, Jonny.
Down below the stream video, there are links to our YouTube if you're watching this on Twitch, or Twitch if you're watching on YouTube, our social media, so Twitter and Instagram, our Discord, which you can join and come and chat with us about things, and other people who also are in the community, the other viewers. And you can also join our Patreon. There's a link to that below as well, with various tiers, not just like tiers, but TIERS, with rewards ranging from access to secret, hidden, forbidden parts of the Discord where you get behind the scenes information and other things like that, and all the way up to Matt, who runs some other games on the channel, running games for you and your friends once a month. So that would be very exciting. If I had more money, I would probably pay for Matt to run me a game once a month. So that's good. Not this Matt. It's a different Matt. If you've watched other shows, you'll know who the other Matt is. Promo on Tuesday nights, Blades in the Dark. Wednesday nights, Coriolis. Monday nights, as I said, normally Call of Cthulhu. So our third arc starts on the 2nd of August. So we're not on next week, but are on the week after, starting the third arc. And the first Saturday of every month is a one-shot adventure, different systems, different GMs, different players. The next one is August the 7th and is the new One Ring system. And bi-weekly on a Sunday, we have a guest spot on the Free League Twitch where we run Simbaroom, the story Fetters of Stone. So the next one of those is on the 1st of August. So that is all of that stuff. So let's do some questions and answers. Yay! I don't know what the first one is. I will do when John puts it on screen. Okay. How much experience do people have playing / running Call of Cthulhu? What would Darkwood and Fingask like to play or run in comparison to your other experiences? Do you want me to start? I'll start. I have run a few bits of Call of Cthulhu. I have run the Haunting Adventure a couple of times for different people, which is the sort of pivotal Call of Cthulhu adventure, which is in basically every edition core rule book. And I have I started running Horror on the Orient Express for a couple of people, which lasted one session. And then I have a group that I play games with on a Wednesday where we kind of take it in turns to each run an adventure for sort of 8 to 10 weeks. And I ran Call of Cthulhu for that. So that's kind of my experience of running Call of Cthulhu. My experience of playing Call of Cthulhu is when Matt has run games of Call of Cthulhu for me, and I think that's it. Although slightly linked, the system that it's based on, the BRP system, Another person in our Wednesday group is a massive fan of BRP, so a lot of the games that he runs are in that. So the system itself, I know reasonably well. But yes, I think that's it. I think that's my Call of Cthulhu experience in terms of the role-playing game. I think for Matt, was it your only thing that you'd played before this? Is that right?
Yeah, so my answer is going to be nice and short and sweet. Yeah, this was my first time playing Call of Cthulhu. The first arc was, and in fact, it was the second bit of role playing I'd done in the last sort of 10 or 15 years or so, other than a one shot with some pals, which Inga was also a part of a little while ago. So yeah, not a lot to compare it with, other than between arc 1 and arc 2, I suppose.
I'm similar. This was arc 2, obviously, just for me, but my first time playing Call of Cthulhu. Other than that, I've played D&D 5e. I've got another private game that I play on a weekly basis, and a couple of one shots here and there, including the one with Matt. But otherwise, yeah, first time playing Call of Cthulhu, and I've played one other completely homebrew system with another friend as well on a couple of one shot sort of short games, but that's it. So not a whole lot of experience otherwise.
I guess I have to ask, how are you finding it, both, if you've not played?
Yeah, I was going to ask about how you found the system itself.
Really good, actually. I mean, it's really different to D&D 5e, and especially at the moment. So the other game I'm playing has been really combat heavy lately. So as a pacing wise, it's really, really different. Actually we played last night, and it was okay, cool. So this whole session this was about the space of 30 seconds. Whoa, a lot happened, because it was we're in a really big bit of combat at the moment. So it's a really different change of pace, and I really love the kind of slow burn. It's like reading a good book. You can almost really take your time to properly absorb it, rather than a action movie. I mean, I love them both, but they're really, really different. But and so there's a real stark contrast for me at the moment. But I've really, really enjoyed it. Really loved it.
I think for me, one of the main concerns I had coming back and doing some role playing and being on stream, having not done any for a while, was that I really didn't want to be a sort of blocker in terms of the mechanics of what was going on, not understanding the rules and slowing things down. That was something I was really worried about, and I was reassured by people within Telling Tales that the sort of structure of Call of Cthulhu would mean that there wasn't a huge amount that I had to necessarily have sort of absorbed fully to be able to participate. And so that's something I really definitely appreciate about the system, was that there seems and again, it's hard because I don't really have any comparison to draw with other systems, but it feels like there's a lot of room for the narrative and the atmosphere to sort of breathe. And that I've never felt like I was kind of having to constantly check the rule book and things to make sure I was on track, but I could sort of cope with it as and when it came up. But obviously I'm sure there's a kind of depth to it that I've not fully explored, but at the same time, it did mean that as a relative kind of newbie, I could spend more of my brain thinking about, I suppose, trying to represent the character rather than worrying about the rule set, and also worrying about slowing things down, and especially when it was on stream. So I did appreciate that about it, but again, difficult for me to compare with anything else.
Yeah, I think there's a lot less that can not necessarily trip you up, but there's a lot less to keep track of in your head, because we've all got the same sort of skills. Again, I don't mean to compare it overly with 5e, but if you're going to be a bard, or you're going to be a wizard, or you're going to be a fighter or a rogue or whatever, it's almost like playing a whole different game, because you've got such different things that you can do. So I guess the barrier for entry almost feels a lot lower, I think, for Call of Cthulhu. And because you don't have all of that mechanic stuff to worry about, it feels a lot more character driven in a narrative kind of sense, rather than in a sort of build kind of sense. I definitely spent a bit more time thinking about the character interactions. We definitely spend more time talking to each other in character, rather than wait, shit, what does that spell do again? And having to look it up. Even though I've been playing that for 2 years, I still have to look up the specific mechanics of that spell, or how many feet away you have to be to do this or that, which I actually really love, the kind of crunchy mechanics stuff too, but it's nice to kind of be able to experience both. And they're very different, but it definitely feels like it's kind of easier to get into more easily and just kind of tell a story. I think with Call of Cthulhu.
What's
Steve,
your
you've played
experience, Steve?
before, haven't you?
Yes. So I guess I've played it for a few years now. Not. I guess going back, I tried to think about it actually. Probably 5, 10. Don't know. But yeah, again, I started off with like that's sort of the classic one shots, like The Haunting, that sort of thing. And we had a group of people who kind of fell into it. The place I worked at, it was something that we started doing. So we kind of took it in turns and ran various one shots, and then one chap decided to go big, and we ran through the Masks of Nyarlathotep, which was excellent.
Nice.
It wasn't this edition; it was the last edition. But yeah, that's a ride. And there's a lot of there's the amount of clues and the number of characters and the interconnections between locations. It's a big old. It's a serious piece of work, and it's the ending of that was really quite entertaining. So yeah, that was a. I'm glad I was able to go through that. I think yes, Wendelius commented that speedrunning horror on the Orient Express in one session is impressive. So,
yeah, that's not quite what I meant, unfortunately. Although if it was this group, maybe they'd have decided to blow the train up at the start, and that would just be the end of the...
Well, it's...
I feel like it took us a while to decide to try and like start setting things on fire.
If you saw some kind of woodland creature at the train station, that'd be
it.
End of
it. We were maybe a bit more trigger happy.
So I guess the other half of this question is what would Darkwood and Fingas like to play or run in comparison? Oh, yeah, that's kind of been answered. I suppose for me, I suppose the main difference is the fact that it was on stream. But it was mostly the admins, the admin stuff at the start that scared me rather than actually running the games. It was weird the first time I when we did the first episode, I was sort of really weirded out by being the only person on screen and not having anything come back to me, because I'm kind of used to doing things in front of people and having some kind of reaction. But when it was literally just me staring at myself on the screen and going through this script, it was really bizarre. So as soon as kind of somebody else came on and we started having interaction, it was fine. And then once we're going, I almost don't think about it as a stream. It's just us playing a game, really, I think, once we're going. So, yeah. Oh, thanks, John. John says I did wonderfully in the chat. I think that's that answered, unless anybody else has anything to say about any differences between other stuff and this. I would agree on the relative simplicity of the system, in that all your rolls are the same, apart from if you end up doing any spells at any point, then you might have to roll something different. And if you do damage, that uses a different dice. Apart from that, you roll a d100 for everything, I think.
But it is pretty easy for new players to, to be guided through. It's d100 rolls mostly. So
nice simple system. LVP73, I have a question. Call of Cthulhu appears to be the biggest of all the games that the channel runs. It seems like the channel is focused more on boosting the visibility of smaller games, which is really cool. Was it a deliberate choice to avoid being another D&D YouTube channel? Apologies if this has been raised or discussed before. Newer subscriber. I think John, did you say that you had something to add to this?
Hello. I know... Obviously, Matt isn't currently here, but I know largely his answer to this, or like kind of our original thought for the channel. The GMs we have in Telling Tales tend to be fairly story-driven, and D&D can have very strong story-driven elements, but it's largely what is referred to as a beer and pretzels game, as it's not attempting to be like filthy D&D casuals or whatever, because I do like D&D, but it's sort of less story and character driven than the role-playing games that our group tended to play, which was Call of Cthulhu, Vampire the Masquerade, much more like cinematic and atmospheric. As the channel description says, we do atmospheric roleplay, and we kind of wanted to carry that over to the channel because, yeah, that's less common as far as we know, and we really like it.
I mean, plus it's, if it's the area in which you have the most experience, it makes sense to, if you're going to run games, you might as well run them well.
Yes.
Put yourself into that. So.
I've done, I don't know if the section of books. Oh no, you can't see it behind me. But I have a lot of D&D 5e books behind me, and I do like D&D 5e quite a lot. But when I thought about running a story as a performance, D&D was essentially at the back of my mind out of everything that I have.
Yeah.
And I was running, like, it was literally before we started doing this, I was running a D&D game, which I put on hold to do this on the Monday nights. So it is in no way that I do not like D&D, because I really enjoyed running it. However, I would agree with Inga's previous comment as well about getting bogged down in rules a lot of the time, and I would find myself putting the story on hold for 5 minutes while I checked something. Not 5 minutes, that would probably be bad GMing, but you know what I mean. So yeah, I think for me, as somebody running the games, like I said, if I was thinking of wanting to run something with some atmosphere and as a performance for other people to enjoy, and wanting to kind of get the story across as the main thing, I wouldn't think of using D&D for that necessarily. As a first choice.
What about the other part of the question around Call of Cthulhu being the sort of biggest system on the channel compared with the other systems we run? Because I'm less experienced with all of those. I mean, I've done a couple of the one-shots now with Telling Tales, so I have now also experienced The Expanse and Honey Heist, which was both awesome. But yeah, I'm not as like in the kind of indie RPG kind of world, and a lot of these systems have been new to me as I've kind of joined Telling Tales, which has been really cool. But yeah, I'm less kind of familiar with that kind of landscape, so I'm kind of interested in the answer to that too.
Simba Room is much newer.
Yes.
Out of the three. And Vampire is very much loved, but I think Call of Cthulhu is probably played by more people than Vampire. I think those who play Vampire might have been playing the same game since it came out. Some of them probably.
More or less, I think.
But yeah, I think Call of Cthulhu is definitely more played. That's what I would say to that as my thoughts. I don't have stats, but I think out of people that I know who role play, more of them play Call of Cthulhu or have played Call of Cthulhu than have played Vampire.
I think just the fact that it's Call of Cthulhu on like its 7th, 8th edition now.
We're playing 7th, yeah.
That is the sign of a long-running and probably much-loved system that has been fairly successful. Was Vampire very, very big in the 90s, disappeared a little bit, languished a bit, and is now coming back and is getting a bit bigger and moving into other IPs, but still, yeah, Call of Cthulhu, I think, is the big one. I'm going to go hide again.
Thanks for the question, LVP73. What's the next one?
Poor John. Feverishly.
I think the next one is, how much prep time did Darkwood/Fingas take? How hard is it to control the pacing? When you start an episode, do you already have a good idea of what the end of the episode / cliffhanger is going to be? Were any sections of Darkwood/Fingas invented on the spot?
Just a quick question.
So, how much prep time do they take? When I go into the first stream, I basically have the first episode relatively meticulously planned, as much as you can plan something that 4 other people are having a part in. But I have like the main beats. So, for example, for Darkwood, I had that they were on the train, and then I had all the characters that, the character that picked them up and took them back to the village, and then I had the barman and the priest interaction when they showed up. That was planned, and then I had the dream sequence at the end of the episode planned, and that session ran more smoothly than any session that I have ever run in my life, because it went from start to finish basically as I expected. Which was incredible and gave me a real boost of confidence going forwards, which was soon to be completely shown to be wrong. So in terms of the actual prep time, I mean, these stories have both been based on factual things that happened that I've then taken and run with a bit and thrown some mythos at. In terms of controlling the pacing, I don't think that I really do that. There's been a couple of times where we've been getting near to the end of a session and I've had a point that would make a really good cliffhanger, and I've been worried that they were going to go to it at like 25 to 10, and then I would have to, kind of figure out what to do, but it's always worked out. So yeah, it's been good. When I start an episode, do I have a good idea of what the end of the episode or cliffhanger is going to be? Sometimes. And then were any sections invented on the spot? Yes, some of the cliffhangers, as a follow-on to that previous answer. I can't go into detail about what was invented on the spot, because it might ruin things later if you realize that something isn't a major plot point that you maybe think is, or vice versa. And also, some things that were invented on the spot have become major plot points, and I think that's fine. I don't think it all have to be planned up front exactly what's going to happen. In terms of, there can be things that kind of feed into other things that are planned.
Are you talking about the vase?
The vase is the most major plot point. But yeah, so it's interesting running games, because I think at some point my notes are going to go out to the patrons, but you will probably spot some differences between. I'm not going to change them, and basically, if my notes for session 1, if anything in there changed, then I haven't edited the session 1 stuff. So the session 2 almost doesn't make sense if you were to read it in order, because it's slightly thrown off. But yeah, you will see that there are some things that changed entirely based on what the characters did. But again, that's fine, because that's kind of how it's supposed to be. And I wouldn't want to go, well, this is what I had planned, so you can't do that. And unless that's because, unless you can work it into the story. So, for example, in Darkwood, honestly, the characters could have just left the village, and that would have been fine. However, I threw obstacles in their way to make it less likely that they would. But if they had literally said, I want to walk to the next village and get on the train, fine. That character is now no longer in the series, and that's fine. I wouldn't have had a problem with that. And we could have got another character that was maybe in the village. A player could have rolled up another character. So basically, I think probably it's difficult to say the prep time, just because it's kind of spread out over the course of the weeks. But I think probably maybe half a day for like the initial stuff, sort of the figuring out what I was going to base it on, and then the figuring out how to move that around into the actual story, what the ending will be, who the characters are, and what the first session is, because that's basically the things that I had planned beforehand. Yeah, I hope that answers that.
for that.
Yeah.
Like, and apologies if this is another question that was going to come up later, but I think it's connected to the prepping time. In terms of like the triggering sort of incidents that made you think, oh, I can create a little story around this, which I know was I think you mentioned at the in the interlude one we did last week, that was Sir John was a real person. Yeah. And the digging up the corpses, the graves thing were real things. Were those things that you've just like sort of stumbled across and sort of squirreled away, thinking, oh, I'll do something with that later, or did you like spend some prep time thinking, I'm gonna go and find some weird things, and it was like explicitly for the games?
The first one I knew about anyway. The Sir John thing I found out about as specific research for this. And the third one, again, I found out as specific research. Yeah, I can't remember how I knew about the burials thing in the village. I think I was maybe looking at somewhere nice to go on holiday in Scotland at some point. Small scenic villages in mid-Scotland.
Yes, very, very strange criteria. That's all I'm going to say.
I've got a very quick follow-on to that as well, Jonny. Sorry.
Yeah.
Basically, one thing I really appreciated about this as well, as someone who's read a bit of Lovecraft but hasn't read everything, and obviously has never played this before, is like, how did you decide how much mythos to have in there? Like how much you'd have kind of winks and nods for people who are really familiar with it? Because I think something I really appreciated about it is it does kind of stand alone from that, even if you don't have, maybe you've never read anything, maybe you know about the author and you know sort of vaguely what it's about, but that's it. You can still really enjoy it and appreciate it. Okay, maybe this was a question that was prepared.
Yeah, when creating a story arc based on real events, how do you go about picking where and how much of the mythos to insert? How much mythos is required to still be Call of Cthulhu? And a slightly broader question, what makes a Call of Cthulhu game?
Boom. And that wasn't me that submitted that, so there we go.
Yeah.
Demand.
So I think I cannot remember how I decided what I was going to do with the first one. And then, like I've said in a couple of things when people have asked questions, I really enjoy sort of folk horror, books and films. So the thing of unwitting people wandering into a small village where something weird is going on and it's slightly uneasy, but you're not really sure. That's kind of my entire vibe in terms of things that I enjoy, media that I enjoy. So, I mean, I've really enjoyed running the second arc as well, but I think for me, the first arc was kind of me in a story. Like I was just doing what I enjoy doing, like what I enjoy kind of taking in terms of media. And then the second one, I decided to make a little more mythosy, because the first one, apart from the book, wasn't necessarily anything mythosy. There are multiple different kind of sections of mythos writing, and my first story maybe fell into like the family history kind of stories that were in Lovecraft's writing, where there was something weird in the past, and often people would sort of see visions of the past and all that kind of stuff from their ancestors. So I kind of took that and moved it around a little bit. I don't know what makes a Call of Cthulhu game. Sanity loss, I suppose, is a big one. But yeah, I would say that the second arc was probably more of a standard Call of Cthulhu adventure, maybe, than the first one. From my experience, just in terms of there being more explicit weirdness, maybe. I don't know. Yeah. So I specifically chose to not have much in the first arc of actual mythos stuff, and then again purposefully put more in the second one. So the third one is just going to be entirely just Cthulhu everywhere. Just, yeah. Elder gods and outer gods all convening in Scotland.
Mythos convention. Excellent.
Yeah. I think the next question is probably going to be one that Steve kind of pointed at about the vase. In the early stages of the adventure, after Sir John was first heard entering the basement, we all got fixated on the vase in the corridor. As a keeper, how much do you anticipate this sort of thing? Do you throw any potential distractions in like that on purpose? And did we end up getting distracted by anything that surprised you? I wasn't expecting the fixation on the vase.
Sorry.
I didn't throw. No, it's fine. I didn't throw it in on purpose, and you did end up getting distracted by the vase, which surprised me. I'm not sure if there's anything else that people have kind of followed after that was not a clue I'd purposefully put in either of the two arcs. There's a couple of things that you potentially didn't pick up on as much as I thought, though, which is fine. Again, that always happens. But yeah, can any of you think of anything that you kind of got honed in on for a while that didn't result in anything?
I think it was quite hard sometimes because there was a point where it was like, oh my God, this is so weird. Like the hair, totally crazy. Wait, there's a lion? Oh my God, the ringmaster is crazy. He's like not jumping. He's jumping down at weird times. Like that's super weird. And then like, oh wait, now there's a circus. Oh, wait, and then we're in the tunnel. Like, and like I almost felt like we couldn't, after the vase incident, like we almost couldn't fixate for too long because there was so much weird stuff going on. It's hard to follow all of the threads as much as we'd have maybe liked to. Actually, I think the biggest thread that I didn't follow that especially after the first episode, I thought, oh man, that's something I definitely want to do, was, in hindsight now, it seems really ironic, was I really wanted to spend more time chatting with Mary because I was like, oh man, she seems really cool from that first dinner on the first episode. But then we kept going off and doing different things. You know, if we kind of think of the party as like everyone, the NPCs are also invited up, like we kind of kept splitting that party into us as, you know, the main investigators, and then them kind of going off and doing things with Sir John or playing tennis or whatever. And so we almost didn't really have as much time for doing that. We kept kind of going in different directions to go and nosy about places, which now knowing what happens at the end and everything there, I kind of, you know, again, hindsight's 2020, but you know, really almost think we could have got a lot more out of that by just chatting to maybe them a bit more. And I thought, oh, Mary seems really cool. I'd really like to buddy up with her a bit, and didn't take that route and ended up, you know, wandering around in the night and looking through magnifying glasses and stuff instead, which obviously had different story impacts. But that was the biggest one that I think I didn't follow. That early on, I thought that's something I really want to do.
Yeah, Mary's a bit of a badass.
Yeah, I don't know whether we'd have got anything out of Mary by chatting to her and spending more time with her at any point, but who knows?
I did love the moment where.
Go on, Steve.
I did love the moment where Mary just shot the lion. Just, you know, one shot, one dead lion. Just, yeah. And again, with hindsight, that was okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. And her husband didn't know she had the gun.
I think that's been more surprising for Robert than any of us.
Yeah. What's been the creepiest, scariest, most shocking things for the players so far? That's from Lord Malice.
I definitely got a kind of a visceral reaction to the scene where I think it was Eliza was looking at one of the performers. That was I think they were a contortionist or something, and she saw someone's face, and I think she got this sense that they were sort of trapped and asking for help quietly while sort of contorting across the stage. I thought, that's the sort of thing that definitely kind of hits me quite hard with any kind of horror. I still think of the scene in Hereditary where she's banging her head against the attic. That like really stuck with me, and it's that sort of mixture of someone kind of trapped and can't control their body, plus the sort of contortion element. There, it's just like, no, thanks for the nightmares, Jonny. Thanks.
You're welcome. Jack who played in season 1 is in the chat, and he said the bell's going backwards in season 1.
Also a great shout, yeah.
Mm.
I was quite happy with the weird noises kind of upsetting everyone so much in the first season.
Yeah, you're good at that, actually, with the circus music as well. You've got a talent for... And actually the Honey Heist theme tune.
Yes, that was a Johnny Gill original.
Yeah, it was all the time you guys are mentioning more of them. I'm like, oh yeah, that one too, that one too. So yeah, there were definitely loads. Like the first two that sprung to mind for me were when we saw the two-headed thing, because Eliza shot at it and then it turned out not to be, you know, a two-headed monster coming at us. So like the kind of shock of actually having hit something, which was a bit of a surprise, and then the oh shit, did I just kill an innocent man? And then the fiance bit at the end was quite a visceral sort of thing. But actually, yeah, the contortionist as well was super creepy. And the circus music, yeah, I remember when the first time you did that, and like I properly got shivers. It was like, ugh. So yeah, just the whole thing from start to finish, Jonny. It was just creepy as hell.
Good. Did you have much thought about whether you'd set it in modern times, or was the 1920s setting always decided? From Jack. Yes, I always planned to do it as the 1920s setting. I haven't run anything set in modern times. The only thing that you would need to account for is sort of removing people's ease of contacting the outside world, I suppose. I guess in the two settings that this was in, you could have done it modern day and just said there was no phone signal, probably quite easily and quite believably.
Yeah. Totally
a village with 100 people in the middle of Scotland could probably quite easily not have any phone signal. But yeah, I think typically, like, non-modern times are easier to make a bit creepy, because even though you have all of the knowledge that the modern age has now, you know that the people there don't. I don't know if that makes any sense. But if you're playing characters who you know have sort of 2021 information rather than 1921 information, then your characters almost know. Yeah, your characters would know that some things could definitely not be all right. I think I'm just rambling now. But yes, it was always going to be 1920s, mostly so that people couldn't just ring their parents on their mobile and ask them to come pick them up. Lord Mars again, was there ever any consideration making this a campaign with the same characters versus individual arcs? So originally, I probably wasn't planning on even having them linked. I'd planned for the first thing to be a standalone story, and then probably do 2 more completely standalone stories. And then at some point during that, I decided to make it ongoing, but we'd kind of already said that it was an anthology, and I did quite like the idea of having a story that ran through the 3 things, but wasn't necessarily the same characters, which we've done with 1 and 2. And then I've then thought it would be quite nice to have a mix of those characters come back for the 3rd arc. So you get some. It's still going to be different because you get some different interactions between the characters. It's not just the same set moving on and having that same thing. And you've got 2 sets of characters who've gone through 2 completely different things as well, which I think could be quite interesting for the players to play out. Yeah.
Yeah, we've all got a bit of experience now. So it's there's always having the first story where investigators are brand new and they haven't really met, they haven't had weird things happen to them. That story is always, like origin story, is always kind of fun. But yes, having one where we get a second bite of the cherry. No, we get bitten a second time
by the
I don't
cherry.
know. Yeah, that should be a different dynamic.
Yeah.
I think the general question about like arcs versus an ongoing campaign is kind of interesting because I think it does, again, it's a different kind of storytelling, I guess. Again, like my other like regular game, my D&D game is an ongoing campaign, and it's definitely different. I mean, you end up with like mini arcs within that, but like I say, we've been playing that almost weekly for 2 years now. And so that's quite a different kind of thing to the, I mean, don't get me wrong, part of me is like, oh man, I really, really want more. But it's also quite nice to have that like classic story arc where you have that kind of building up to that climax, and you know, you have, yeah, it doesn't necessarily have to follow the kind of traditional sort of story arc, you know, the hero's arc and all that kind of stuff, but it's nice to have a kind of an ending with it as well.
Do you feel a bit freer when you're doing something shorter, Jonny, or anyone on here who's run something before, to kind of not have plot armor for the characters? And because I can imagine, again, not having done a long campaign like that for multiple years, I can imagine you'd feel that sense of sort of not wanting to pick them all off, kind of all the characters off when someone's spent a year kind of playing with them or developing them, or is that not an issue that comes up?
I think in Call of Cthulhu, if you do something like Steve was saying, the Masks of Nyarlathotep, I mean, the keeper can choose to run it however they want, but I think typically people go through about 15 characters in that game. And again, in Horror on the Orient Express, I think it recommends that you start the game with 3 characters or 4 characters in mind who are maybe sort of like a not on screen party for your character. So if you've got a character, you've maybe got also an assistant, and you've maybe also got a parent who is keeping tabs on where they are that can show up to look for them later. And that kind of continuation, it kind of recommends that you have that. So I think in Call of Cthulhu, killing characters off isn't as, you know, it's pretty expected. And
this is why your investigators are always writing letters to, ex-professors and whatnot. It's kind of handy to...
yeah,
an entry point game to them.
But in this, I think this is a good length to be able to get a character to at least near the end of before something horrific happens to them, but not feel like you're going easy on them either. I think it's a pretty decent length to have people, you know, be able to go to some level insane by the end of it, or even be killed off if that was what ended up happening, and it not feel like anybody was hard done by or protected. Like, it would seem relatively fair. So yeah, that's my answer to that one.
Oh, thanks. That's interesting stuff.
Do any of you have a professional background in creative writing or storytelling? Did you come to it purely as a hobby? I certainly do not. I wrote 25,000 words of a fantasy novel when I was about 21. So I enjoy creative writing, but I definitely do not have a professional background in it at all. I was also the only year 7 in our year 11's school play at school. I played, I had to wear a suit, and I was about 3 feet tall, so I looked absolutely ridiculous. So there you go. That's my answer to that one.
I had one professional acting job as an extra back in the day, like a long time ago. But other than that, I'm a massive like theatre nerd, so I did quite a lot of a bit of everything, but definitely quite a lot of acting, like all through school and uni and stuff. So lots of that. I did write one god awful play once as well at uni. It was truly terrible, but it was fun to have done. It was very kind of them to put it on. But yeah, so I did quite a lot of stuff, quite a lot as a hobby, but not in terms of storytelling. And again, like lots of creative writing just for personal enjoyment, but otherwise nothing professional.
Steve, do you want to go?
Sure. Yes. No. I like the idea of creative writing, but as yet I have remained undisciplined and never get anywhere. But yeah, it's a fun hobby. Maybe one day.
So I was in a publicly funded film cautionary tale about bonfires when I was 7, which my mum still has on VHS in the house, but I don't think it was ever put on a TV anywhere other than in my house. So yeah, that's it really. So my IMDb is not great.
There's a patrons extra for the channel then, maybe.
Yeah.
I also have a VHS of me being the mock turtle in Alice in Wonderland when I was 11. So yeah, maybe Matt and I can share those with.
You are kidding me, Jonny. I was also the mock turtle in Alice in Wonderland once.
Were you?
Yes.
Wow.
Oh my goodness.
My mum made me a shell by cutting out hexagons of cardboard and attaching them all together and painting them all green so that they would move around and be flexible on my back.
That's it. You don't want CGI, do you? It's too much.
No.
Practical effects are so much better.
Did any of the players have any backup characters in mind just in case the worst happened? That's from Jack. No.
I trusted that Jonny would either let us survive for an appropriate length of time, or
maybe warn you. The only time that I have ever actually killed a character off, not near enough to the end that it didn't matter. It was pre-agreed with it wasn't in a Call of Cthulhu game, but it was pre-agreed with the player that we would kill their character off at a dramatic moment. But yeah, that's the only time I've ever killed somebody off at a point where other people went, huh?
Yeah, I think it's the shorter arcs. I hadn't particularly thought about it. I figured if something happened, I hoped it wouldn't be anywhere like too soon to the beginning, but I figured it probably would be too late to kind of bring something in. If it was an ongoing thing, I probably would have had more of a thought about it. It was also my first time playing, so I was figuring out one character,
and didn't know how high the stakes were.
Exactly. Well, there was definitely a point where I was like, "Oh, Eliza is not going to last much longer. She's going quite mad now." There's been quite a lot of sanity loss, but again, it was already in the second half of it anyway. So, yeah.
What are your thoughts on characters becoming ever more unhinged as the story progresses? Do you enjoy playing them? Find them challenging? Props to some of the recent performances. Would you be okay with your character going permanently insane midway?
Yeah. Well, like I say, I thought Eliza could well have done that about just over the halfway point. Yeah, I think that would have been totally fine. I mean, what happens, right? You just got to kind of roll with it. But I mean, hopefully it's because of something cool going on in the story, which I trust it would have been. But yeah. As for like performing it, like it was definitely a bit weird. I've not played in a system where sanity is a core mechanic before, so that was definitely new. It was fun. I have very much enjoyed playing this game.
Good.
From my end, I guess, if I'm honest, I would have been a bit apprehensive about it initially. I think again, just from a kind of experience perspective, and but I think again, it as the first arc went, as we had a few episodes of the first arc going through, and it became clear to me that it's going to be a gradual descent. Probably that seemed to be the way it was going, but possibly if there was anything major, it wasn't going to happen in like episode 2. So I had a bit of time to sort of, I guess, mentally prepare myself for what's happening. So my personal sanity was probably decreasing quicker than Dane's sanity was through the initial episodes of the campaign. But yeah, I think again, I suppose what I may have done subconsciously was prepare a character who I felt wouldn't have a reaction that would be really difficult for me to act out, if that makes sense. Like I kind of built in some elements to Dane in particular, that where he was coming back from being quite isolated and he wasn't like particularly socially active. So he wouldn't maybe have been as performative if something really, really bad had happened. And I'm not embarrassed to say that some of that was kind of conscious, because I knew it was my first run. So, hopefully that didn't come off as too premeditated for people watching. But yeah, from that sense, it was something that I considered. But I think, having seen Arc 2 and what happened there, I'm excited for the possibility of things like that happening.
I was going to say, I think with Dane, you did that really well, because he was kind of a subdued person and starting to come out of himself a little bit more. And then when weird stuff happened, he just went back into himself again and kind of sat quietly, and everything was going on around him. And I think that worked really well as a character trait.
Oh, thanks, Jonny.
Yeah, it's an interesting one in terms of knowing how to getting the arc right, getting the gradient right for a descent into madness is challenging. It's much easier if you're writing a story where everything is fixed and you as the author know what's coming down the line. It's quite another to on an improvised situation with the roll of a dice to suddenly decide then how your character is going to should behave. That's something I still feel rather nervous about. So good tips from Matthew. I wish I'd known before I created my character. Although actually my Edmund is fairly straight-laced and sensible and still has a pretty high sanity. So fingers crossed, I can figure that out ahead of time. But yes, huge props to both of you for playing. Yes, the moments in the stream, it's great being part of it, because seeing how other people manage it and play it perfectly is just, being part of that is just a wonderful experience. Seeing it all sort of unfold on screen. So
everyone's doing wonderfully. I've been blessed with some great players.
Like I say, like even though he's not here, and I know he didn't have the same bouts of madness and stuff, I thought Sam did a really good job with Albert. Yes. And the way that his, especially like the playing off that relationship with Willie as well, like how, like really seeing like him start to depend on Willie a lot more, and even setting aside the stuff that you chatted about in the interlude, which was heartbreaking, but really good to hear about, like really even seeing that within the story, even though like mechanically he hadn't necessarily had that sanity loss. But I mean, there'd obviously been parts of it, but not like to the point of having bouts of madness and stuff. I thought that was really well done too.
My favorite bit with Albert was when he just gave up and just trudged into the circus tent. That was great. I was like, this is excellent. This is really good. He's just gone, do you know what? Fine. We'll just do it.
Because I was there with him too. So it was the moment when he sat down in the mud and was just like, what? And then like the resignation just kind of seeping in, and then getting up and going into the tent. Like, because I honestly don't know that Eliza wouldn't have done any of that stuff if Albert hadn't been going through that stuff, that inner turmoil, I guess. But yeah, just amazing little moments without any like mechanics, sanity, system stuff, just pure character role play was beautiful. Yeah.
Pop us that question back up, John. Lord Malice again, was it planned that Sky's character would just be curled up in her bedroom for the last couple of sessions of Darkwood, or was she just absent and it worked out that way? The latter. Unfortunately, she had to be absent for the last couple. But she'd just taken, if I remember correctly, she'd taken a pretty big sanity hit at the end of episode 6 anyway. So that just managed to tie in quite conveniently at that point. That's it for that, I think.
John's just comment in chat about Cymbrium with a dog barking. I've been reminded about that, and it was hilarious.
John, we did have a moment on Cymbrium where a player's dog wandered in and barked during a really tense moment, and we all just broke down laughing.
It's always a risk. It's always, hysteria. Always just moments away.
This was an interesting one. Mythos package / becoming a believer, pages 62 and 103, Investigator Handbook. I love the idea of an academic who thinks they are studying myths and legends, having their reality crumble devastatingly around them in one go. But I don't think I've seen the rule used. Is it something that would be allowed, or do you try to avoid packages and other optional rules? I do personally. I don't avoid optional rules. A lot of the time, I don't use them because there are enough rules anyway. But we have used the spending of luck in this, which is an optional rule. And I quite like that if you use your luck, you're then less likely to get lucky doing something later if you need to make a luck roll. I honestly had not read the Becoming a Believer thing until earlier today. Or I don't remember having read it. I'm sure I have at some point. But it's basically you can choose not to believe what you're reading in a mythos text. And then you add Cthulhu Mythos to your mythos skill, but no sanity points are lost. And then at some point, you can either choose to believe or something forces you to believe. And then you instantly take a hit of your Cthulhu Mythos points from your sanity. So if you've accrued like 15 Cthulhu Mythos points while choosing not to believe it, and then you suddenly realize that all this stuff you've read is true, you just get absolutely hammered with sanity points. I quite like that as a rule. But yeah. We haven't used it. And the what was the other bit? Sorry, the packages are almost like pre-built changes to a character type. So you kind of gain some stuff and lose other stuff. So it theoretically keeps it balanced. It's just you kind of create your character and then you can go, also it's this. And then you kind of adjust the stats slightly based on those things. Again, I think they're fine. Also, I'm quite lax on character creation. I would do things like that anyway. So if somebody said, "Can I, add to this because I've done this and I don't have the points for it," I would kind of try and balance that out with something and try and make it work. So yeah, I'm definitely not against those in any way. Just haven't used them.
I do like how they give people ideas or suggestions of things that they might otherwise not think about. And yes, of course, Samuel kind of went through. It wasn't exactly a sanity hit, but the realization when we found the hidden door, and Samuel realized that there were strange things in the world. That was a lovely moment as well.
Yeah, that's the kind of thing where I think that rule would have been really good, but actually Samuel had still been taking the sanity hits previously and had just been denying to everybody else that he'd experienced those things, which was quite fun. Fake it till you make it. That's
or go insane.
Yeah, one of the two. Thoughts on playing in the modern world? Would it be interesting to you, or do you prefer the classic era with all its charms, quirks, and beliefs? What about the other Call of Cthulhu settings? Which one would be your favorite to visit? I'll let all of you answer this one first. I've been jumping in on them all. If anybody wants to.
Who wants to start?
You go for it.
Go on.
You go, Steve.
Okay. It's so I've played. I've been lucky enough to play some one shots in sort of not exactly convention settings, but sort of small groups of I guess it was like a convention. So yeah, I've had the opportunity to play rather more varied games. So one I played in was this Cthulhu Invictus, which is set in the Roman era. So that was based in the UK, and was great because all of the other games I played prior to that, like port one, the first port of call, was you'd find the mystery and you'd go to the library, and then you'd stay in the library until you'd done your research and you had a good idea of what was going on, and then you'd venture out, and if anything nasty happened, you'd rush back. And with Cthulhu Invictus set in the UK, there were no libraries nearby. There was nowhere we could hide, so it was like, oh, I guess we'll have to take a look then. And it was a really it was a nice rich setting. It was well written, and it just got that sort of flavor across of a totally different time and place. It was that the system's a little bit more, I think you were possibly slightly more resilient in terms of combat, as long as you weren't fighting horrendous unnamed monstrosities. But it was just a nice tweak on the standard on the standard fare. So that was really good. And modern day adventures can be great as well. But the problem is I played one where it's harder to, when you've got a little bit of distance between you as a player and the character, it's easier to think as the character would think. Whereas the first time I played a modern day scenario, it was like, well, why wouldn't something weird's happen? We've just found a body. Why would we not just call the police?
Yeah.
There's a weird fire. Why would we not just call the fire brigade? And that was a bit of a struggle too. There was a certain amount of a step to overcome there to sort of, there had to be reasons in the world why going to the fire brigade in this instance was a bad idea, and the GM had to kind of work in elements and give us a bit of a pointer. And then yes, okay, once you're in, once things are flowing, it's fine. But yes, if you've got a bit of distance, it's easier to I guess play with a clean slate and just step into the story. However, having said that, go on.
I was gonna say, philosophically, I think that's just such an interesting idea, because the idea that history kind of puts distance between us and these people, it's like the classic thing where Cleopatra closer to now than the pyramids, and all that kind of stuff where we just get really confused about how time works, and it's really easy to forget that people in history are real people. It's really interesting because when we talk about history, there's all of these awful things that happen, mythos, Cthulhu mythos related, or real history kind of things that have happened, and it's really easy to kind of have that distance from it. But when you kind of step into those shoes, and one of the big ones for me was when I read The Handmaid's Tale, because you go through most of the novel, through the eyes of the main character, and at the end there's this epilogue where it's 100 years in the future or whatever, and it's like a history there's a history lecture talking about the events, and it's very well, you can excuse it because it was the time and things were different, which is exactly the way we talk about history now. But you've just had this emotional whirlwind of things that have been going on, and feeling in the shoes of the character, and you go, no, but that's so unfair. It doesn't matter that it was history. There were real people. So I totally understand. I totally agree. We do have that distancing, but it's also kind of weird that we have that distancing. And I think role playing is kind of an interesting stepping between those. You kind of half step into the shoes enough to kind of just focus on the story, but without getting distracted by all of those well, why don't we just go to the fire brigade kind of things, which is kind of I think it'd be really interesting in maybe 30 or 50 years time. There'll be Call of Cthulhu games set in the 2020s, and we'll look back and just think, God, how weird, why don't they do this or that, or that's not what things were like back then. And I'm looking forward to, in 50 years time, watching some streams of games in the 2020s and laughing at that. So.
People saying that they don't want to play in modern times because people are just teleport away from the problems.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, teleporters can go very, very wrong. That's fine. There's no problems there.
I think for me, obviously early days, it sounds fascinating what you did, Steve, with the Roman era and stuff, and I can imagine playing around with it. I guess in terms of how that sort of Lovecraft influence has perpetuated all kinds of genres and time periods, I guess it just fits in nicely anywhere. But one thing I did think was really fun about being in the 1920s era was that there's this interesting intersection between sort of, I guess, a certain old-fashionedness and then modern technology coming in. I know that in our private chats on some of the StreamYards, there was some kind of, we were checking when certain quantum theories were being talked about and things like that, because it's a point where people have grown up without anything, you know, with just kind of Newtonian physics, and then there's a little bit of a edging towards that. And then you've also got characters who've experienced sort of a dramatic explosion of technology and the negative aspects of technology as well through their experiences in the First World War. But it's not like you can't just Google everything. So it kind of sits nicely in that sort of transitionary period, I suppose, where people would be able to have intelligent conversations about what they're experiencing, like Edmund did when he was seeing things through the magnifying glass. It's intelligent, it's not totally off-piste, but they don't completely have the knowledge base that they would need to either just disregard it or interpret it, you know, in a more mechanical way. So I just thought that was really fun, and I suppose like taking a different angle, I can see why you might choose this period again and again and again and again, because it just has that wonderful sort of aspect to it. But yeah, obviously, you know, sounds cool taking it to other places too.
Do you have thoughts on that one, Jonny?
So I haven't played actually any of the other sort of Cthulhu versions. We were discussing on the Discord yesterday Delta Green, which I have the player's book for, which I would like to play or run at some point. Which, if anybody doesn't know, is basically your like Mythos SAS, I guess, is the kind of vibe. But what I do like is in Horror on the Orient Express, there are sort of dream sequences and stuff that are set in the past. So you can end up doing things at different time periods in that as well. And I'd quite like, I think somebody said, was it you, Steve, that said that they were doing the Cthulhu Gaslight 7th edition stuff? Was it you that said that? I don't know. I think somebody said that they were planning on those. And I'll probably pick that up when it comes out. Because that'd be, yeah. Again, it's a, you know, different time to now. So it's, you don't have to worry about explaining away all the modern technologies that might get somebody out of a situation, which is quite handy. And I just think it's creepier playing in the past, I think, typically. Everything's a bit, you know, not electrically lit with bright sort of neon lighting and stuff.
There's a challenge. There's a challenge.
Yeah.
Different kinds of creepy though, right? Like I love a good like dystopian future kind of novel and, you know, things like that too. But I guess it would feel quite different. It definitely is like a different sort of brand of creepy, right?
There's another game which again we were talking about on the Discord yesterday that I've got called Kuro, which is like a Japanese cyberpunk horror game. So it's set in 2048 in Japan. So it's got sort of the you know, sort of Japanese folklore as potential weird things that people might actually see in real life. And yeah, that's a really fun setting, because you can still imagine, like in my head, I can picture an empty Japanese neon lit street and you seeing something just out of the corner of your eye. Again, that's something that I can kind of picture and go, that would be something creepy to do in there. Whereas if I were to try and run a modern Cthulhu game, I think I would still want to set it in sort of a small village in the middle of nowhere. I probably wouldn't want to do it in a city, probably. And then that kind of removes the need for it to be in the present rather than in the past again. So, yeah, I don't know.
I think there's something as well about kind of back to the, things not being, not having the realities of like fire brigades and stuff. Like, I think if I was doing something in a modern setting, I don't think I'd want to do it like modern setting is in, where I live now, like, in the UK or, somewhere like, or a town that I'm really familiar with. I think, that would feel probably a bit harder to immerse and like lose yourself into the story. I think having it set somewhere that's a bit different, where you can kind of, forget about the practicalities of those sorts of things, is probably part of what helps with some of that. I think that's probably a bit of the trick to it, whether it's, that it's remote or that it's just unfamiliar. It's also easier to feel like lack of uneasy when you're unfamiliar with the place as well, and when you don't know things, the fear of the unknown can affect you more. And
I was going to bring that point up exactly, and I'm going to steal John's job for a second and pop this comment up. Sorry, John. Yes, fear of the unknown. Like, there was an earlier question about what makes a Call of Cthulhu game, or indeed a story. And I think it simply put, fear of the unknown. And anything that can take you, that isolates you, that there's something that you can't comprehend and understand, that's going to be, it doesn't have to have tentacles. They help, obviously. But anything that unsettles you to the degree that you just don't know what's going to happen, or you don't know how it's going to affect you or whatever, it's a great starting point for a story. Yes, and Alien is a fantastic film, and the bit with the eggs, the egg repository is just chilling. So
we're so lucky they never tried to explain any of that, and they stopped after 3. Thank goodness for that.
I had not seen Alien 4 until about 6 months ago.
You can do it to yourself.
And now I have.
I've only seen Alien.
I would stop, or maybe the second one, but then stop.
Yeah, I was going to say that it's probably nicer to have only seen Alien and sadly missed out on Aliens than to have seen Alien 4 as well as all the others.
I'm sure I could stop after Aliens. Well, maybe we'll see. Right. It's not a choice between just Alien or Aliens plus everything else, is it?
No, I was just pointing out that I really like Alien and Aliens, but I would rather have not seen Aliens than have then seen Alien Resurrection, because yeah. Anyway, that's Alien.
The RPG is good.
It is very good, yeah. One commenter on the finale of Fingas mentioned it felt a bit like a cutscene. I think it's fair to say it's part of a bigger storyline and was more of a dramatic chapter ending. But how do you balance player agency when dealing with the manifestation of powers much greater than them versus creating a compelling ending? Do you feel they should be able to significantly change those events in Call of Cthulhu? I put the power of players in 2 camps. One is pre-summoning an entity, and one is post-summoning an entity. Pre, when they're just dealing with people, fine. That they can stop whatever's going to happen. Once a being of unimaginable power is standing in front of them, there's supposed to be nothing that they can do, really. I know that all of these kind of outer gods and such have stat blocks in the rule book, but I think if anybody ever looks at the stat block and plans on using them, then yeah, I don't really know what that would be for. But yeah, I think if they're dealing with cultists trying to make something happen, then they can have some power. I think once something is there, they're gonna struggle. And yeah, I think the thing mentioned there about it feeling a bit like a cutscene, I think what's written in that question is basically how I viewed it, which is basically this is the end of the second part of 3 things, basically. So we kind of wanted it to go out on a bit of a bang, and I actually replied to that comment saying that basically it was like the ending of The Two Towers as far as I was concerned. You kind of got people at their lowest ebb a little bit, and I felt, and I was worried when doing it actually, that the players would feel that I'd kind of steamrolled them, but I spoke to them all afterwards and they said that they really enjoyed it, so then I didn't feel bad about it anymore. Because I am a big fan. You may have noticed that my GMing style, I sit back and basically let everything happen as much as possible, and then just kind of guide towards things, or if NPCs need to do things, then fine. But I try not to massively push the characters in any particular direction. I don't like railroading or anything particularly. So it was something that I was worried about, having essentially an NPC come in and do something, but it was part of setting up something else as well, which had been hinted at throughout the second arc in a couple of points with Mary.
Yeah, I thought it was kind of interesting because, I mean, we're investigators, not necessarily heroes. And so for me, it wasn't a big deal that, we weren't necessarily the ones to solve the problem or, finish the story for this particular arc. I guess you could almost have, in a way, you could have removed us and, Mary was still there and things would have happened. There was an extent to which, I think we had, agency and power are not quite the same thing, right? So we didn't have the powers to stop that. Mary did. We had a lot of agency in terms of what we did from start to finish in terms of what we could do and what we did have access to as, characters who didn't know anything about any of this stuff, and we're finding out, stumbling across it all for the first time. And I think that's kind of interesting as well, because again, it's that sort of putting yourself in the shoes of someone who has just stumbled into all of this weird shit, and how the hell do you react to it? I kind of saw it more through that lens than okay, so how do I fix the problem? I mean, obviously as characters, we were trying to fix the problems, and that's what we were talking about. But as a player in the story, again, having a sort of story arc, we knew there was stuff that was happening in this story. It was a closed arc. It wasn't going to go on forever. So there were things that were going on anyway, whether we tried to stop things, there was something there to try and stop. And we didn't engage with Mary. We made choice. That was our agency was, we chose to go off and do different things rather than spend more time at the library or go and find that book sooner, or try and read from the book ourselves, or chat to Mary and find out that stuff. So some of it's also the result of our actions doing different things, or our inaction in those areas. And yeah, I mean, for me, it's super interesting because, especially because, like I say, I'd thought to myself, I'd really like to find out a bit more about Mary. Having that ending made me whoa, what the hell is going on with Mary? And this period between arcs 2 and 3, Eliza definitely is interested in that stuff. And it definitely it almost feels a bit like an origin story, like you said, Steve, for these characters, which kind of does end on a bit of a cliffhanger, or a what next? This is how does it? What's that sparking point rather than the end of their story? So yeah, for me, it wasn't something I was upset about at all. I thoroughly enjoyed the ride. So yeah,
good.
I'm very glad that that there is that there's a third arc. And that we might, if we're lucky, get to see a little bit more of what Mary's up to, maybe or not.
Yeah, maybe not.
We'll see.
I mean, I'm really interested to see what happens with all of the characters now knowing a bit more about this stuff, and how that will then affect, what happens in the storyline, but also how that affects us all as characters, and the interactions that we'll have and the way we engage with the story, I think will be quite different in some ways.
Yeah, I quite enjoyed the scene prior to going into the tent, where I think we were discussing the book as a group. And really, we kind of, all we'd gathered was that this was important, but we didn't really understand how. And we did actually talk about sending it away or destroying it. And obviously that was a crucial item in terms of Mary using it to actually, who knows what would have happened if we had destroyed it and sort of Mary went to look for it and it wasn't there. So in a sense, I think for me, it did feel like and I'm sure, something would have had to change in terms of the outcome there. if we had decided to do that. But we had decisions we could have made, to Inga's point, that would have had a big impact. And ultimately, we didn't decide to take the right approach because we couldn't figure out what the right approach was, because we were mere mortals and not heroes. So I think for me, it all sat quite well. And actually, the dramatic escalation in the tent helped me quite a lot playing Samuel, because it was almost like a panic. It was just like complete and utter panic, and scrambling to do something. And I think he kind of picks up a gun and just fires it, and it's like with no sense that it's going to make any difference, but just all he can think of doing. And yeah, that was great. Appropriate to me. It felt like the right thing in the scenario. So yeah, well, enjoyed it a lot.
Given your backstory as well, which people can hear more about in the interlude episode, that was again like all the way through. Because you'd been taking sanity hits whenever gunshots had gone off, and again, we'd not known about that ahead of time. It was just Jonny would start asking you to roll sanity. It's like, oh, that's not in the rules. That's an interesting, and to have the payoff of you avoiding guns all the way through, and then finally, decide that it's desperate enough that.
That was good.
Yeah, and it didn't help. Oh, well.
But so so another thing that's worth mentioning is it might be different for the players playing the game, because it's been very story focused. I can understand how, as players, for us, certainly speaking for myself, it's been a great ride. It's every 5 minutes something new happens, that there's more to discover. So from a game point of view, from a player's point of view, the journey is the thing. I can understand how, if you're watching it from an audience point of view, you might well be expecting the finale to sort of, fireworks to go off and for something big to happen, for a big turnaround. That you have these in various Netflix presentations and so on. For me as a player, that wasn't a concern at all, because the journey had been amazing. And obviously we have the knowledge that yes, there is more to tell. This was kind of like I guess we might have fallen down was because Arc 1 was so separate, there might have been the feeling that Arc 2 was going to be very separate as well. Whereas if it had been billed a little more as sort of like a mid-season break, then I don't think anybody would have had any concerns about it. It's the precise lowest point in the hero's journey so far, and then things kick off again in the next part. So yeah, I think it's one of those things. I think I'm very much looking forward to seeing where things go next. Hopefully other people will be too.
Yeah, me too.
Hope so.
Favorite moments from your characters and each other's characters and any NPCs. For me, I've already said about Albert just giving up. That for me was a great bit of role play. Inga's section with her temporary insanity in the final episode for Eliza was excellent, I thought. Yeah, in fact, I think for everybody in the second arc, their performances in the last episode, I think, were great. I
looked through a lens and just went comatose. So
that wasn't all you did, Steve. That wasn't all you did. And in the first season, first arc, I think I really enjoyed Sky's character just basically shouting at all the people that everybody else thought might cause some real trouble for them. That was really good. I'm trying to think about specific moments in the first season now.
Melvin. You have to mention Melvin.
Yeah, Melvin kind of standing up to his uncle in the final episode. That was really good. Dane and Jemima. Oh well, Dane and Jemima's will they, won't they relationship, which might be resolved in the third arc also as they come back together. Yeah.
Yeah, Melvin's arc was great. I really enjoyed that. Because he kind of stood up to his uncle, but then he came through for the group. I think he was given an opportunity to not come through for everybody, and he did. So yeah, he became the hero at the end. I think pretty much. So
I like that the biggest shock, like sort of jump scare of the first arc was Melvin's uncle's car rolling into town. The biggest surprise.
I just love the phone calls, because into the question from earlier on about creepy or scary moments, just Melvin's uncle on the phone was definite, talking about visceral reactions. Amazing stuff.
I really enjoyed playing those points. I think I probably sold Jack a bit short by dumping him with that within about 30 minutes of starting the first session, when he maybe wasn't expecting it. Jack has put in the chat, I definitely had a real reaction to having to speak to Melvin's uncle. And anybody else with any favorite bits?
For me, I loved the moment with Agnes, where we were carrying Thomas back over the Thomas from the woods, and the way that Agnes responded was perfect. It was clear that yes, that Thomas was not just another member of staff, and the way that came across in the cup of tea moment, where she just goes off and is just poor Agnes. It was just a marvelous scene.
I had such a turnaround with Agnes, because when she first got introduced, and we thought she was sort of accusing us of something. I was so convinced that she was up to something funny, especially when then we saw her kind of off by the hill fort. And that also, by the way, is one of my favorite moments, when Samuel was just like, I'm going to go follow her. And I was like, what the hell are you doing? But yeah, such a turnaround on Agnes. Oh my goodness. Would have died for her by the end of that. And like that turning point, once she had that chat with Samuel first, and then with Edmund kind of going in and kind of caring for her a bit as well, and just being very gentle and kind, and just so kind. Oh, so many kind little moments with Edmund that were really lovely. As well as the sass with the early scientist sass.
That was
fun. Samuel kind of admitted what he'd seen and stuff. Yeah, loads of really nice little moments just sprinkled throughout. Yeah.
I really pictured Samuel following Agnes as like full Pink Panther sort of, Scooby-Doo sneaking as well. That was what was in my head at that moment.
I have to ask, were you Matt? Were you deliberately playing Samuel like that?
So I think, in my head, Samuel felt kind of he felt a bit isolated from the rest of the group and everyone else there, to be honest, for the first few episodes, I think. And he definitely thought that Agnes was massively up to something. And I think he was taking a bit of a risk, obviously, kind of following around. But the sense was, if he could figure this out on his own, he'd have some kind of currency to bring back. And I think that was where it was coming from. And I know it was definitely, for the group, it was like, what the hell are you doing? he was just thinking, she's definitely doing something. I'm just gonna go and see, because if I can find out what this is, that we're being set up, and come back and evidence that, is going to be, I'll put myself in a better position. He was thinking of himself, I think.
That's so interesting though, because aside from the obvious, I feel really isolated, so I'm going to go off on my own to do something. That the irony of that. It's also interesting because the isolation. I don't know whether obviously I can't speak for how Samuel felt, but obviously one of the early things that happened was that he was the only one who said he didn't hear the funny noises, And like that was certainly a point where Eliza, and I think for the others too, were like, what's up with you? And that definitely, I felt that put a bit of a distance between us in the group, and like there was a point where Eliza was a bit suspicious. And again, the moment when Samuel finally admitted to her that he had heard the noises, that was another like quite memorable little character moment for me. But again, it's interesting that was something that Samuel had chosen to do, which I think put a bit of distance between us with the group, which led to you going off on your own to try and get back in the group. Yeah, it's so interesting, the psychology of all of that.
I definitely had this idea that he would deny stuff for some period of time because that was his sort of modus operandi. And I didn't realize how much it would actually isolate him quite early on. But then it was like, let's run with it. And I just wanted to throw in one moment in all the scariness and all the great character acting. The bit where Albert stuck his head out the wall was just hilarious. Like it's just like absolutely hilarious. And I was like, it didn't derail everything, but I was genuinely like just laughing so hard at this point. Because didn't he put his arm out first?
Yes.
We got a bit of a shock, and then he put his head out.
Oh no, the arm's bad. I'll stick my head through instead. Yeah.
I love that bit.
I think with Samuel, correct me if I'm wrong, Steve, but I think you as player, even not just as character, wondered if me and Matt had sort of convened beforehand to have him as involved in the plot.
Yes.
Yeah.
It made there were various points in the setup where Samuel's background kind of fitted, and yes, I was working off player knowledge rather than story knowledge, but there were elements where it's like, yes, this is. If Samuel had been a plant, some sort of, showman, some sort of, theatrical performer or something, it absolutely sort of fit the facts that I'd seen so far. So, yeah, it was great. The way it all worked out, with the bits of isolation, and then you trying to combat that by going off on your own and creeping us all out. It was lovely.
Lord Malice, was it originally planned that the magnifying glass did so much to reveal stuff hidden doors mythos text? So the glass was obviously previously in the care of Sir John. I think that became clear at the end. And I had planned for it to... he was using that to get into the basement, basically. I hadn't originally planned for it to also decipher the text. That wasn't in my notes or anything. It was just to get them through the door. But when they started like pointing it around at things, I was like, yeah, sure, we'll go with this. So it wasn't originally planned for it to send Eliza on a trip through space either. That was an off the cuff decision.
Mm.
Well,
what the hell? Oh, cruel in the moment.
Yeah. So yeah, again, the sort of in front of your eyes deciphering of the book and all of that was off the cuff as well.
Is that same with the contortionist and the ringmaster at the end and everything? Was that also all later?
I'd planned the sideshows. I had the 3 that you got recommended to go to by the acrobat were the 3 that I'd specifically written sort of creepy plans for.
Oh, sorry, the contortionist I didn't view through the magnifying glass, did I? Sorry, it's just the ringmaster, Edmonds, or
I hadn't planned that originally. Literally, my original plan was just for it to do the door. And then when I decided it was sort of some kind of semi-true sight, kind of allowing you to see things that you wouldn't otherwise be able to see. And Steve had mentioned trying to look at the hair with it at some point. My brain went, oh, okay, if he looks at anything that is actually whatever this thing is, then it will go badly. And it did.
I still think I got off fairly lightly.
For now.
But, for now, yes.
Yeah. Did anyone else pick up on the missing NPC Thomas babbling about stars and planets that he also mentioned the Mythos creature's name? Steve did. I knew Steve would.
As someone unfamiliar with a lot of the Mythos and this being the first game, no, absolutely not. And I'm going to go back and rewatch those episodes.
I was trying to keep my face straight for that one. Yeah, because after the first, here we go. After the first episode, where the end of the episode was, the squeaky gas valve, and then the buzzing, the insectile buzzing, that immediately, in my player's head, MeGo are involved. MeGo brain cylinders. There we are. That's what's involved. And again, because of I might as well explain this now. Because of that's where I started thinking Samuel was a bit sus, because Samuel had been talking about life after death. The soul separate to the body. It's like, oh, hello. So John's talking to MeGo. Then when we had the reveal in the forest, I was like, oh yes. So I was trying very hard to keep my face straight there. I thought, yeah, again, it was a lovely, lovely moment. Nice sort of little hint for those people who might be in the know.
That's a great nod, yeah.
You clever bastard, you.
I was kind of watching Steve's face out of the corner of my eye when I said it as well. Yeah, it was good fun. And good spot by Lord Malice. Yes, I was worried that I thought that if people knew kind of Mythos creature names that they would pick up on it. So I'm glad that people did. Favorite Cthulhu-y / Lovecrafty media. I borrowed a book from the other Matt, which was really good, and I've forgotten the author's name. Something Ramsey. I've forgotten his name. Those were really good. It's called the inhabitant of the lake and other stories.
Ramsey Campbell.
Thanks,
yeah.
Thanks, John. And that's very good. I also really like. I enjoyed the film of Annihilation, and I've recently just read the book as well. They were cool, kind of Lovecraftian. Does anybody else want to go while I think of some more?
Well, I was going to ask you, do you think that House of Leaves is?
Oh yeah,
Lovecraftian, or?
Yeah, I would say it's quite Lovecraftian, and I love House of Leaves. Very disappointed by other things of his that I've read, but House of Leaves is great.
Yeah, they were going to be two of my picks. This is going to sound maybe a bit plebeian, but like True Detective season 1, which is King in Yellow, maybe more, but I just loved how that was incorporated, and to the point of you don't have to resolve everything to make it great.
Yes, yeah.
Prime example of that, I would say. Yeah, so other one, different media, really like Bloodborne. If anyone's played that, if you haven't, give it a go. Yeah, those were going to be my two picks, but yeah, True Detective season 1, top tier.
It's the way that the stuff was hinted at was amazing in that series, and also the cost, like the cost on the investigator, if you like, was just really impactful. There was obviously such a weight to what one of the guys had seen that
it also managed to avoid every sort of cringy trope that they might have fallen into the pitfall of, particularly with the acting, because I noticed that a lot of people I know who've seen that show didn't notice that it was kind of incorporated at all, but they just see it as part of the journey that the characters went through, which I think is just such a nice sort of way to incorporate the kind of cosmic horror side of things into something that's much more grounded at the same time. Yeah, I just thought the whole thing was just masterful. It's like the only TV show I think I've watched like 5 or 6 times through before. Bloodborne on the total other side is like as on the nose Lovecraft as you get. So two sides of the pendulum.
But again, it's quite, in terms of, I mean, I've not played it through to completion. I've read about it, so I've been spoiled. But the way that the story plays out, again, is it's quite a slow burn. There's something off. There's definitely something off.
Yeah.
I mean,
And
other than the monsters that attack you out of the gate. But
and the weird thing, I suppose, without getting too meta, is that you can play it as an investigator almost, because most of the lore and the story is hidden in sort of description text of items, or it's just shown and it's not described in terms of sort of some of the designs of the creatures and things like that. So there's obviously amazing videos on YouTube where people have obviously spent a lot of time kind of dissecting it and then figuring out what is going on. But you can also just play it straight through as like an action RPG and not pick up on anything if you want. But again, it was lovely how they incorporated it all.
who's next?
I'm like mostly here for recommendations because I'm not sure that like
Okay.
there's a lot of the stuff that I've really touched on. I'm trying to think, and like I'm sure there'll be like some Doctor Who stories that are probably quite Lovecraft like inspired and quite big fan of Doctor Who. But other than that, like I've not played some of these games and not watched some of these. But yeah, so I definitely will take some of these recommendations away and go away and read and play and watch some more stuff, I think.
There's
John has
also
mentioned Uzumaki in the chat as well, the Junji Ito manga. A bunch of Junji Ito is quite Lovecraftian, and I have loads of them right here on my shelf.
I think there's a lot of science fiction that I've read as well that's set in the future that pulls a lot of it in. I think lots of sort of Ian M. Banks books seem to have quite a lot of Lovecraft dropped in here or there. And there's also a series that I'm in the middle of by M. John Harrison. The first one's called Light, the second one's called Nova Swing. I'm not sure what the third one is, but that's got lots of nods to it as well. And similar to Annihilation, it's got that sort of roadside picnic stalker sort of vibe to it, where there's an area of land where nothing works and the sky is different and time doesn't function and people are dropping in and out of it and pulling artifacts out and that sort of stuff going on too, which is really fun. But yeah, they're sort of loosely linked, the three, I think, but you could definitely read Nova Swing on its own as basically just like a reimagining of Annihilation or Roadside Picnic. So yeah, that's a good one.
I think I'm probably contractually obligated to mention some John Carpenter films. My
I've seen a thing. Yeah.
I mean that is possibly, and I know Matt is also, other Matt is rather taken with that one. It's definitely on my. I tend not to think of top X films, but I love The Thing so much. It's amazing, but also. Prince of Darkness, it's worth watching. It's sort of more mainstream, I guess. But I have a real soft spot for In the Mouth of Madness, mainly because there are definite strong Lovecraft references, sort of a bit of a Stephen King pastiche as well. But then, the way that all intertwines and ties itself in knots is just the sort of thing I really enjoy, that sort of stuff. So yes, John.
There was a Thing board game that I think came out and went out of print pretty much instantly, and I really wanted it, and I never got it. So I just remembered about it, so I'm going to start looking out for it again. So if anybody has the board game, I can't remember exactly what it's called, but it looked really good. Also, Lord Malice has said in the chat about the Color Out of Space film with Nick Cage, which I watched at the beginning of this year, I think, and I loved it. The bit where his wife is chopping in the kitchen is just so good. Yeah,
when she's in the attic as well is also pretty messed up.
Yeah.
I was going to say, if I'm doing video games, being the video game one, how good is The Thing for the PS2 and the Xbox? Like whenever that came out, if you haven't played it, there's a video game of it, and it's weirdly good. I don't think it's sold very well. I don't know if it was even critically that well received, but emulate it if you get the chance. It's really fun. If you own it, of course.
I have it somewhere. I'll have to, dig it out from some old box somewhere. Yes, Event Horizon. Some LVP 73 has. Yes, that's another. Sam Neill. Big fan of Sam Neill. So In the Mouth of Madness and Event Horizon, both. Sam Neill goes off and chews the scenery a bit, and it's glorious.
Yeah, he's ace.
That Dead Space.
There's an episode of Love, Death, and Robots in both season 1 and 2. If anyone's not seen that Netflix series, it's a series of sort of shorts. They're like 5 to 10 minutes each. Really, really good. And there's one in, I think, towards the end of season 1 that's full Lovecraft. So I'll find the name and post in the chat. And there's a second one that's about Christmas, and that's also full Lovecraft, and it's about Santa. So without giving any spoilers, also check that out. It's 7 minutes long or something, but it's hilarious. I'll drop both the episode names in the chat.
Wendelius has just reminded me in the chat, it's called The Thing Infection at Outpost 31, I think, which was a Kickstarter. And I think it's a kind of, almost like Betrayal at House on the Hill, where one of you is, I think it's that kind of vibe, if I remember correctly. But I think it got really good reviews when it came out. So yeah, I might try and find that for myself. Maybe if I win the lottery, I can't imagine it's cheap. Maybe I could sell my Kuro book, which apparently is worth quite a lot of money. I found out the other day.
Oh wow! Yeah, there's so many great. We should probably, Discord. If you want to continue discussing great Lovecraft bits and pieces, then yes, come over to our Discord and continue. Yeah,
it's filling up. We're having lots of nice conversations in there every day. It's great.
Yeah, loads of story ideas, that sort of stuff. Maybe John has the link. He asks. Hopefully, I can probably find it as well.
Are there any more questions, John? I've posted the Discord link.
Excellent.
Yes, good plugging.
Oh yes.
Oh yeah.
Can't forget that.
I was torn on this. I had two ideas, and I've decided to go for the more specific. So the new arc is going to be called Ballamore, spelt Baile space MOR, which people might Google it anyway to try and find out, is on the Isle of Iona off the coast of Scotland. So that's the
sounds nicely isolated.
What's the story in Ballamore?
And had a just for Eliza's benefit, had a parliamentary election in 1929, which is when this season will be set. So that's exciting.
Okay.
Miles Jupp will be guesting from Matt. Cool. I think that's everything. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for chucking in more questions live. That's been loads of fun. And yeah, please, if you are in this chat and not on our Discord, please come join it, and you can chat to us more about Lovecraftian things and coastal towns with different coloured houses. Thanks, Kirby Ting, and I know who that is. And thanks whoever gave the anonymous gift sub also. And thank you everybody who's joined in the chat. I can't remember if I said that. I know I said thanks for sending messages, questions, but thanks for being here and viewing and joining in. It's been lots of fun. Cool. We will be back on the 2nd of August with the beginning of Arc 3. So if you haven't watched or finished the first two arcs yet, you've got plenty of time to catch up. And Tuesday nights are Blades in the Dark. Wednesday nights are Coriolis. The first Saturday of every month is a one shot. The next one is the 7th of August, which is going to be the new One Ring system. And every 2 Sundays, we've got a guest spot on the Free League Twitch, where Matt is running Simba Room, and the next one is the 1st of August. That's it, I think. So thanks, everybody. been great.
Yeah, good fun.
Cool.
Yeah, cool.
Thanks for the questions.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks,
See you
everyone.
soon.
See you soon.